welcome to Horror 101 with Dr. AC, a gathering place for fellow fiends the world over to discuss all things freaky and frightening. If you'd like to be part of the discussion, and I hope you do, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, maybe go back and check out some of our previous episodes, leave a comment, and most importantly, let us know the fright flicks you'd like to discuss in the future. That kind of engagement is exactly what we're looking for, and it really does make a difference. We're all about sharing the scare, and we want to hear from you. In reportedly his personal favorite role over a very long career, Vincent Price has the time of his life as critically reviled Shakespearean actor Edward Lionheart, who sets out to even the scores with his enemies in the press after being denied the illustrious Critics' Circle Award. Theater of Blood from 1973 predates the trend of future body count movies in that it's less a question as to whether his victims will perish, but rather how they will meet their prescribed demise. While essentially following the same path blazed by the Abominable Dr. Phibes movies, the literate quality of Anthony Greville-Smith's screenplay elevates the proceedings markedly, and the absence of the Phibes outings' more bizarre aspects makes for a more streamlined and accessible affair. I also enjoy Lionheart's recruitment of a bunch of drunken vagrants to be his accomplices and built-in audience, though it's clear they know not a hawk from a handsaw. I'm joined tonight by another fantastic panel of lovers of theater and horror. Let's bring in Kurt Ehrman, Janine DeFrancesco, Michelle Corvée, and Krista D'Agostino as we discuss Theater of Blood from 1973, celebrating its 50th anniversary. Welcome, everybody.
Yay.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hi.
So glad to have you all. We are all members of the Chicago theater community, and so this seemed like a perfect gathering of folks to discuss this movie. It's one of my personal favorites. I'm a big fan of Vincent Price, and this is truly one of my favorite of his outings. Let's just go around really quick and just kind of, where did you all encounter it for the first time, if you have a personal history with the film? Kurt?
I mean, it was a long time ago. It was on TV. I've never seen this in a theater. And for rewatching it for this, I realized that I believe that there's at least one sequence that I certainly never saw in its entirety. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Krista?
It was actually 2 or 3 years ago. The Criterion Channel was doing a month in October where they had all 70s horror films, and it was one of the 20 that they had on it, and I had never seen it before. And like you said, we're all theater people, so my husband and we decided to watch it, and we are obsessed now.
And Michelle?
Oh, I would never have watched this except for you. You talked me into it at some point several years ago, probably because Diana Rigg is in it, and that will get me to watch pretty much anything. And I hadn't seen it in several years. I think this past viewing was only my second time, and I was excited to see it again because I remember loving it, and I think I loved it even more this time.
And Janine?
I know about it because of you. So I was kind of fresh. So I've seen it for the first time a couple of days ago. And I really liked it. Yeah,
You'd never seen it before. Oh, wonderful.
No,
wonderful.
no.
It's not nearly as surprising as you're letting on.
Well, I think when I first proposed it, you seemed enthusiastic. So I thought that was born of personal experience, not from the idea that it might be awesome. My history with Theater of Blood is we were actually, I was 10 years old, so it was a reissue in the theaters in 1978. And there were a group of us that were going to go see Theater of Blood because, Vincent Price was Uncle Vincent. And, why not go out and see Vincent Price murder a bunch of people? But the babysitter got the times wrong. And so we did not see Theater of Blood in 1978. Instead, we saw this little movie that nobody knew anything about called Halloween, directed by John Carpenter. And a bunch of 10-year-olds in the theater watching Halloween was not appropriate. I later caught up with Theater of Blood, and I enjoyed it mightily, as I enjoyed Halloween as well. And what I really enjoy is Vincent Price really getting a chance to show his range as an actor. He had a great love for the stage and for Shakespeare. And I think, much like Mr. Lionheart, I don't think he was ever given the credit that he deserved as a performer, even though he was beloved as a screen presence. So I thought it was a nice job of casting.
I wonder if he was having as much fun as he looked like he was having. I mean, if I recall, he met his wife on set, his
third wife.
Okay, so that must have been fun. But he looked like he was having an absolute blast. And I just want to throw in that I was shocked this time at the very beginning of this movie, like how quickly it gets rolling. Like right away, we are in it. Something really terrible happens in the first, after we get through those amazing opening credits, something really terrible happens. Like, there's no build up, there's no waiting time. It's like TikTok probably in the first 4 minutes of the movie that shit goes down. And I love that. I loved the shock of that because Vincent Price, the whole, is it a comedy or isn't it? Sometimes it is, but it gets going real quick.
Well, I think that's one of the things I love about Vincent Price is that he does always seem like he's having a good time. Like Peter Cushing, he never looked down on the genre that had made him a star. And 1953 was when House of Wax came out, and that was a huge hit, but he really didn't work for several years in between that and, say, like The Fly in 1958, because there was that stigma attached to being a horror actor. And it wasn't until he did Fall of the House of Usher in 1960 that he kind of found his groove working with Roger Corman. He did a whole series of those Edgar Allan Poe films.
Well, he didn't seem to have, and not to dominate this conversation so early, but he didn't seem to have a problem getting a bunch of legit actors in Theater of Blood. I mean, look at that cast. That cast is crazy good.
Yeah,
I mean, I can only imagine like that being an absolute dream for those filmmakers,
Yeah, my understanding is that like that happens not infrequently. Like actual reputable stage actors, they were trying to make a living just like anybody else. So like especially with Hammer films and stuff like that, like people would show up. It's like in Michael Haldern being our first victim, which was, he's so damn good. And that sequence, I think, Michelle, I think this is a very funny movie, and I think that that's its intention. But at least the first murder, it's like it's actually really affecting. It's very creepy. The vagrants are just odd and off kilter enough for it to actually work as like just a very creepy introduction to the whole thing for me.
Well, and I love like that idea of that it balances the humor and the horror so well. And if we're talking about Shakespeare, like it reminds me of problem plays. Some of my favorites, like Cymbeline and Winter's Tale, where you're like, is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Is it like, what is it supposed to be? And it's all of those things. And like horror and comedy live by the rules of the same rhythm. And it's fun to see those things happen side by side in this film. And like, it's just self-aware enough, I think, that it's such a great wink and a nod for like folks who know all of these Shakespeare moments. But even if you didn't, you know the perception of a big like matinee idol, like a fading matinee idol. You know what that's supposed to be like. You know what like a actor's relationship with critics is like. So you can still take a lot of delight in it. And the second time around, watching it for me, I thought it was funnier than the first time because you notice all the little like looks and moments, and it's perfectly big in some sections and just like tiny little like side glances, especially the like inept cops, where you're just like, this is fantastic. The commentary is fantastic.
Oh God, the cops just suck. They're just
so inept.
And they keep saying, "We'll protect you." I'm like, based on what evidence? What are you talking about?
You won't. Well, and that the wink and the nod thing. I mean, just with that, how many Shakespearean villains can we think of who look at you and tell you exactly what they're going to do.
Yes.
They tell you. And I love that, you know, once the inept cops figure out with the head critic's help, I can't think of the guy's name, forgive me, but the one who survives the duel, once they understand, oh, he's following the order of his final season, well, he's telling you exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So, and which I thought was so delicious, you know, because that's what Shakespeare did.
And I love that it happens in the middle of the movie, where a lot of films, especially now, you'll see the villain speech, like the let me tell all help, happens like right at the end, right at that climactic moment, and he's like, no, I'm gonna tell you in the middle. There's still like 3 more kills that have to happen, but we're just gonna lay it all out here right now for you.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of those people that we see, the meth drinkers or whatever we're calling them, I had this interesting reaction. The meth drinkers, yeah. I had this interesting reaction, like about halfway through. I was like, okay, this is a 1973 release. We've already been through Charles Manson, and it creeped me out that here we had this like charismatic leader of this band of people that were street people doing drugs, whatever. And I was like, I wonder if that's also a commentary on what the world has just been through, to make it maybe just even a touch darker. Like I found that really kind of, that scared me a little bit.
Well, especially when you juxtapose that with all of the shots of where things were filmed, like in these beautiful high rises, like looking out these gorgeous windows, these tremendously decorated interiors of their apartments, and like they just live such opulent, lavish lifestyles. And then you have that really gritty, grimy. Well, they're 2 groups, right? Like it's the group of the meth drinkers and him, and then the group of the critics. So it's interesting seeing those 2 worlds side by side.
Our groundlings, as it were.
Yeah, and I don't want to like I don't know what sort of sequence we're going in, but like, I mean, their introduction is earlier, but when you actually see him first meet them, it's like got this weird like Snow White vibe going on. Like they pull him out of the river, and like there's this weird bond that they strike up.
Well,
I mean, it's just a fascinating thing.
Do you all feel like, since you brought that up, Kurt, do you all feel like he actually intended to kill himself? Because in the scene leading up to him jumping, it looked like this was a ruse, and Edwina, Diana Rigg's character, is following him going, no, don't do it. And, you know, and I'm thinking, okay, this is the beginning of the ruse. He's going to pretend to kill himself, and then this is the way the plan starts. But then I wasn't sure with the way he was sort of rescued, and they're giving him the meths to drink. And that's another thing where I'm wondering if the commentary on drugs is like, well, this guy was slightly crazy before, but the meths made him even, more insane and crazy. But yeah, I wasn't sure about that, about how everybody reacted to that like pseudo suicide attempt. I wasn't sure about that.
I mean, for me, it really did seem, I'm with you, that it did seem like something he had planned to do and that she was in on it. However, then you get to that scene where he meets them, they pull him out of the river. I mean, it seemed like that was happenstance. Like maybe he did not actually intend to kill himself, but he didn't intend to meet up with these people. Although, and another great thing about that scene, when they pull him out of the water and basically revive him, through all that, he's still holding on to the trophy.
Yeah, I know. That was so good.
He wanted that bad.
So good.
How long did it take you guys to figure out that it was Diana Rigg dressed up? Like, did you know it right away? It took me 3, because at first I was like, oh, it's just a groovy, 60s guy, And then it was like the 3rd time I saw her, and I was like, oh no, And I think that was on purpose. I think they let us see her be more feminine, you know, and so just to kind of clue us in. But I loved that. I loved that I didn't know at first, and then I got to figure it out before, so I could feel smart, you know.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think of it in the very first, because I think the first time we see her in that costume is he's like, "Come on, stage manager, get them all, get the audience in order," and I don't think you see quite enough of her to like understand.
It's too far away.
It's too far away. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it took me like at least a couple of scenes the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second.
Well, in my case, it had been so long since I'd seen it, but I still remembered some stuff, and I was immediately on the lookout for her anyway. And I think it was just like on the second time she popped in, I went, there she is, and that voice, yeah. That terrible wig.
It's so terrible.
Oh, it's a great wig.
Yeah.
I love how awful the wig is, though. Like, I think that the hair, and I mean, obviously, because I do makeup, I'm going to talk about that. The makeup and hair in this is perfection for me.
So
it's like everything I want to see in a film like this. I don't even care that you're like, that's clearly not someone's real hair. It's just like, it's so spot on.
Well,
Crystal,
his makeup.
Think of his makeup. Yeah, go ahead.
But I think your makeup is spot on. Especially Kurt, you look fantastic.
Thank you very much. No, like his,
see a little more
makeup,
powder.
especially when he's playing Achilles in the Troilus and Cressida murder. Like, that is just great. It's very evocative, and I think in general, like, I remember this movie basically being camp, and I enjoyed it on that basis. But this viewing, its sincerity really struck me, and I thought that was just a marvelous thing to see, and it certainly made it, much more compelling than, when we said we were going to watch it, than I expected it to be again. So it's great, and stuff like that. It's like the makeup and just the commitment to what they're doing.
Yeah. The artistry of it, like that design throughout the entire film, is so beautiful. And even with the meth drinkers, like there's something about their makeup too, with them being like slightly pale and those little pops on their cheeks. And I love the bright purple that keeps coming out in their drinks, the way it accents the scenes. And you can see that there was a lot of, like, you could easily like write this off and be like, it's like schlocky, like, some dude goes around and kills them, blah, 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 blah. But there is such a level of craftsmanship to everything that's going on in it, and you can see how well thought out it all is. That it is. There's a real sincerity, like you said, Kurt, to it, that I think makes it really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, the planning that goes into the kills is just, I know that they're probably not related, but I did remark to AC that I was like, oh, well, here's the beginning of the Saw franchise, because the machine that was going to take out what's his name's eyes at the end. And by the way, if you're strapped in a chair and the hot daggers are going to come into your eyes unless you give him the award, you give him the award. He just kept saying, no, I will not. And I'm like,
what's the thing
with you?
Like he had integrity. Yeah, like he had integrity.
Here's something that got to me about that at the end. It's like all the cops burst in and they're racing against time to get him out of this contraption. It's just a cart. And gravity's working. Just hold the cart. Just hold the cart back.
Dumb.
Get the dude out of it.
They're so dumb.
Again, terrible fucking police. Terrible police.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of dumb, the police were just, and I loved how the lead policeman always seemed like, oh, we're going to get this. I'm like, what on earth makes you think that? You have like
those eyebrows. You have those eyebrows.
Single time. Yeah, it's the eyebrows. Yeah.
Well, it's the Mr. Bean. I kept calling him Mr. Bean. I was like, oh, it's the Mr. Bean guy, but it's not Mr. Bean.
It's not Mr. Bean.
It's Milo O'Shea.
It's Milo O'Shea. He's marvelous.
Right.
And come on, he's by far the most competent, if clearly over confident police officer in the film.
Yeah.
Everyone else is pretty dim.
Well, and speaking to the sincerity, I think it goes along with this production. I think a lot of that does go to the ensemble of actors that were assembled. Like Kurt said, you know, this actually fit kind of in that Amicus anthology, in that you were able to get these great actors for just a couple of days at a time. You didn't need to have them on set. So you were able to afford this for a relatively decent price. See what I did there? But has anybody seen The Abominable Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Rises Again? Because those precede this. Abominable Dr. Phibes was 71, and Dr. Phibes Rises Again was 72, and those follow that kind of themed murders. The Abominable Dr. Phibes follows the plagues of Egypt. Like each one of the murders is in line with those. What I like about this film, Theater Blood, versus the Dr. Phibes movies, is that the conceit for Dr. Phibes that he was horribly mangled in an accident, and he has a Vincent Price mask on over this kind of scarred visage. But that means that he can't react. Like he plays the mask as though like it is just a stationary face. And so he doesn't get to do a lot of the Vincent Price stuff that we love, that we don't get to see a lot of Vincent Price expressions. Whereas this allows him to have more fun playing at being an actor, as well as dole out the gory goods.
You know, I was thinking about the last time I saw a Vincent Price movie other than this one, and I obviously I have not seen as many as you have, but it was Witchfinder General, and I was thinking about his performance in that versus his performance in this, and I'm not, I'll just say it, I'm not a huge Vincent Price fan. I'm not sure why, because he's a delight in Theater of Blood. He's an absolute delight to watch. But I was thinking about how he gets to just sort of go wild in this. Let's just be honest, the kills in this movie are really like the camera does not turn away from too much of it. There's things we don't see, but there's so much that we see, and it's really horrible. And he's just like, yay, because I deserve to do this to all of you. And I was just thinking back to that other performance in Witchfinder General, and I was like, that was not funny.
Right. That
was not a funny film. That was not a funny story. And this shouldn't be as funny as it is, but there's that like it's so of its time. Like here we are in London, and it's like it takes place in the time when it's just the present, and it's like swinging London, and the colors and the costumes and the over the top weird shots, like shots from below, and the strange. I'm not even sure which shots I'm trying to say, but I think y'all who've seen it know what I mean. But it's very 60s looking. And yeah, that really kind of answered my question, at least for me, as far as, is this a comedy? And, comparing those two performances, I'm like, yeah, I guess it is. Even though it's really horrible. It's really horrible what happens to those people.
I think we're given permission to find it funny because, I mean, the premise of just killing your critics is kind of funny. But I think back to the kind of sincerity of it, Diana Rigg loved and admired him so much that through her eyes, we got to see that he was really good and the critics were wrong. And we're kind of fine with them being killed. You know what I mean? Like if he came off poorly, or if she didn't seem to have like this absolute love and respect and admiration for him, it wouldn't have worked. We wouldn't have been able to laugh at it, because it is, I mean, they're really gruesome. I mean, the fucking dogs. I mean, Jesus, it's a lot. It's a lot.
And I did find myself rooting for him. Really, absolutely.
Oh, totally, absolutely.
This is so clever. I was pissed off when he didn't off the guy in the sword fight. I was like, why did he let him live? I still don't understand why he let that guy live.
See, that's the sequence that I'm pretty sure, until I saw it this time, I never saw that in its full form. Because it's also like, you could excise that out of the narrative because it's the one thing that doesn't fit in. But I know I never saw them fighting, dueling on trampolines. They cut that. They cut that.
What a day on set, right?
It's brilliant. It's so brilliant.
Oh, it's marvelous. It's so great. It's so great. And, and also the blood, the color. I told Aaron I was going to say this. Like, the color of the blood is just so good. It's not real looking. Yeah, but still, I mean, people maybe Aaron can speak to this. Like, I mean, that's a lot of trial and error because they used a lot of blood. Like, did they just get the A team for this one?
Well, I think that it's definitely not the hammer paint that we oftentimes will see. I agree. I think it's really well done. Something that kind of just struck me as we were talking is if Vincent Price in 1973 had decided he was going to do a turn on Broadway in a bunch of Shakespearean plays, I think it would have been well attended, and I don't think he would have gotten any awards because I think he was viewed as a horror actor, and there wasn't that kind of geek factor that had worked its way into kind of the gatekeepers at that point. Like, we weren't ready to honor people like Roger Corman until, the 2000s. So I feel like that's why I really like that casting, because he's clearly a talented actor and a beloved actor. And yet we are also like, theater blood was never going to be considered for any Oscars, right? Even though it's a terrific lead performance.
I would totally go see Vincent Price on stage doing Shakespeare.
Well, and they
Many
did a
people did.
presentation of this. I was on the Wikipedia, so I don't know, it's Wikipedia. But I saw that they did do a short run and they adapted it for stage, and they basically cut a lot of the extraneous characters, so anybody that wasn't a main critic, and they had to so that also meant that they cut a couple of the killings because they happen like in the bedroom. Which would be such a disappointment because the Cloten style killing is my absolute fucking favorite. Can I say on this?
Of course you can.
Oh, and his horrible wife. His horrible wife.
But it's so perfect because like the music is like swelling and like it's a song. I'm just like, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. But they did a short-lived run that was mezzo received. But I would actually love to see this. No, he was not, sadly.
Oh, okay.
But I would love to see this on stage. And this is something we haven't chatted about yet. Like, just all the like clear love for Grand Guignol in this film. Like, imagine like being in the box seats and just like the blood everywhere on stage. Like, it would just have like an audience like ripping their hair out. It would have been like I would have loved to see this in theater, like just to like have that like visceral reaction with everybody else.
Oh my God.
So cool.
Well, can we just go ahead?
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, can we just for a second celebrate that bedroom beheading? Because I mean, I'm sitting here going, okay. I come home, I come to my bedroom, and there's a giant fucking chest in my bedroom. What is happening right now? I'm just going to go, we'll figure it out tomorrow. Let's go to bed. There's a giant chest in our bedroom. I just loved the bizarre reaction to that. And then the fact that they come out and they wham the syringe into his wife's butt. And then they had to do it again. And the noise she made, oh, I mean, the whole thing was so good. And they're cutting off his head. Actually, I thought that guy got off easy. I mean, he was at least unconscious for it. So
we do have to talk about that head moment though, because it was the first time because the head rolls off in the morning and the housekeeper discovers it, but then suddenly it magics its way over to Peregrine Devlin's. It sits on top of his milk jug. I'm like, how did that happen?
They must have still been in the chest, I guess. Like, I mean, the maid who found them passed out, so. They were banking on that.
Let's scare somebody and she'll pass out and then we'll take the head and put it somewhere.
Well,
I do have
what we're
Everything had to go right in this movie. Everything had to go right.
Yeah.
And it did.
but the cops are so bad. I can see them giving the head to a milkman and having that milkman's next delivery. I mean, that's how bad the law enforcement is.
So bad.
Well, and
I can see
also
that
the critics get fooled easily because they're so arrogant and they think they're so far above everybody that they fall right into their traps because, again, they don't, it doesn't even occur to them that somebody might be a couple of steps ahead of them, especially like the sleazy guy when she's all decked out and he puts his hand on her thigh and I'm like, oh man, you were easy. I mean, she's gorgeous and I get it, but it's like, oh my God. But it's like they figured out what their weaknesses were and played into, dude, yeah, he needed to die.
I do have a theory about why Peregrine Devlin, played by Ian Hendry, why he is allowed to survive during the duel. And that's because we only had 9 critics and we had 10 murders. So he had to play out all 10 plays to fit his scheme. So that's why he allowed him to live so that he could kill him at the end, King Lear style.
That's got to be it.
All right.
That's some Lionheart thinking, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and then especially it sounds like he particularly hates him because he's never given him a good review. So it makes sense that he would, toy with him a little bit more to get that grand payoff.
And he has, it's clear that Devlin has kind of sway over the group. Like he's clearly the one in charge. They
keep throwing him under the bus the whole time.
Exactly.
Whenever the critics are scared, they're like, it was Devlin.
I'm still stuck on the there are a couple of the kills that really stick out for me, and the dogs in the pie. Everybody has little things in their life that there's a reason why certain things affect you in a movie. And my mom used to make this chicken Kiev. It was either chicken a la king or chicken Kiev. And sorry, Mom, but it was it was gross, and it was like in a white sauce. And I was so horrified when I was watching that particular kill. I was like, oh no. This is so, I was gagging just remembering, my hatred of chicken Kiev. Imagining that was actually dog meat made it even worse. But it was like,
did she use a funnel to feed you?
She used a funnel to feed me, and I would choke, and she'd feed me almost to death each time. So it was a terrible memory. But that scene is so nasty on so many levels.
Yeah.
So nasty.
And it's so funny because you got Robert Morley as the Light and the Loafers dog lover.
Yeah, animals were harmed in the making of this film, at least.
But a thing I thought about that too, it's like he's never not with those dogs.
Right.
And then at this weird moment that somehow Lionheart knows about, he knows the dogs will be alone. It's like, you just got to go with it. I know that.
They're his children. Yeah. I just love the cleverness of all of it, but some of it was particularly disturbing and gross.
Well, and that one's a really hard one because it doesn't have that beautiful red blood, which I think allows you that sort of non-realistic color that it's doesn't matter if you're being hacked or sliced, you can kind of take a step away from it. But when someone's being force fed, you're like, that just feels so real that it's that was the only one that I have to look away myself because I'm like, I can't handle it.
Yeah. Well, that shades of the movie Seven. Although he didn't.
It really reminded me of Seven.
Yeah. And
it really reminded me of Seven.
Somehow we're still talking about a comedy. Amazing.
Yep.
It's kind of like a grown up Charlie and the Chocolate Factory too, in a way, all those weird things that happen to those horrible kids, where you're watching that movie and it's ostensibly a kid's movie, but you're like, this is really grotesque and really, really obscene.
Oh, my mother said it was a horror movie. She always said, whenever it came
totally
on.
Is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it has that sort of that same thing where you can laugh at it and then go like, ooh, like what is happening?
Terrible.
And you don't really feel sorry for the victims. I mean, they're all awful. They're awful. I mean, okay, the dogs. I feel bad for them. But other than that, so
I don't know.
You're allowed
Didn't they
to
suck too?
They kind of
that
they were
wasn't. They
spoiled.
didn't dress themselves. They did not dress themselves. That
It
was
wasn't
not
their fault.
That's
It
true.
was not them.
That's true.
But I
Robert
also
Morley.
Robert Morley. I also want to just call out the wonderful way that when shit was going down, literally, and he had started the fire in the theater, and suddenly it turns into Lear. I mean, the cleverness of this script. I just loved that. I was like, oh my God, he's doing So yeah, really appreciated that. And he had to go down in flames.
Yeah, Aaron, do you know anything about the filming of that? Because I mean, the practical fire in that is just so extraordinary. It's so good.
Yeah. I don't know anything other than I really do appreciate it. I think it's because you're like, wow, that looks like that might be hot right there, Vincent. Yeah. Step back. Anthony Greville-Smith is our screenwriter, and he actually didn't do much beyond that, beyond this film in terms of kind of notability, which it's surprising based on like how kind of how witty and knowing this script is, that it didn't because I feel like it was a successful film, successful enough to get a reissue in 78. So
maybe he was like, that's my best work. I can't top it. I'm going to go sell books somewhere. I'm out. Yeah, possible. But is there also a nod? Am I crazy? But the ending where he's carrying his daughter, Cordelia, when he's carrying her up to the top, am I seeing a nod to any of the Frankenstein stuff or the the Hunchback? I mean, that whole image to me
certainly Hunchback. Yeah.
King Kong.
Yeah. I thought that was cool that was kind of just in there, and it's also one of these movies I think that deserves a couple of rewatches for all of the little stuff that maybe you might have missed, like that. Yeah.
Well, and something you mentioned when we watched it this most recent time is that it opens with Michael Hordern's wife referencing the Ides of March.
Yeah.
It just as in Julius Caesar, which is something that,
she's dreamt this. She's had this vision.
Exactly.
Don't
like
go,
Lionheart
honey,
couldn't have
don't go.
orchestrated that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was great.
Did you notice that she kept doing this? Like, I was like, what does that mean? Like, she's a good act. She kept doing that. And I was like, does that mean something? Am I missing some symbolism? But
did her finger or her thumb? Was it like, I bite my thumb at you? Or
it was something like, it was weird. It was weird.
Listen, darling, we really need a button to this. So if you could just do something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, by the pricking of my thumb, like
something wicked. Yeah. References abound. But can we back up to the very beginning, the opening credits with the black and white? Right. I mean, I was watching that going, wait a second, this is real. This is not, this is not Vincent Price in makeup. I'm watching like John Barrymore or something. Does anybody have any info on that? Because I did not look it up. I should have.
I mean, I guess the only thing I know, I haven't seen those particular pieces of film, but like Shakespeare plays and theatrical plays in general, like right at the beginning of cinema, like they honestly didn't have any other content. So a lot of these things were filmed, and it seems like that's what those were.
Oh, they're so great. They're so great, those opening credits.
I think the grand kind of course acting that is occurring also kind of sets the mood that we're not to take this too seriously, folks. And I think it's a really nice kind of setting of tone.
Unless you're being electrocuted in a hairdresser's chair.
Oh my God.
I know, isn't that nasty?
That's my favorite thing, that they're all like, oh yes, we have to have the police with us. We can't go anywhere, but I can get my hair done. But I just have to go to this wine tasting. But I just
right. And the police will wait outside.
Like, we'll just wait outside. Don't worry.
Or just upstairs. He'll just be upstairs.
And then he'll hear something and he'll go,
And not until he smells
do nothing until it's way too late.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
And that is Coral Brown as our doing our Joan of Arc in Henry IV or Henry VI Part 1. And that is the future third Mrs. Price.
Oh, really?
And the only murder I don't think we've mentioned yet, actually there's two. We haven't mentioned the drowning in the vat of Malmsey from Richard III, and the Othello murder, where the massage is taking place.
Oh,
weird.
I liked that one.
That's so weird.
It's so weird.
Yeah,
and then
I
I
liked
love
that
when
one.
he leaves and he just says to the cop, like, I think so-and-so is murdering his wife upstairs. And the cop's just like, oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's
Yeah,
like,
I like
no,
that's the
He's
only...
telling you there's what.
It's really... I like that that's the only one where the critic themselves doesn't directly die on stage. I thought that was an interesting thing because, like we've talked about before, we get right into the film, we get right into the killing, and like, you know, the game up front. So it's interesting to see a little bit of a twist, so it doesn't keep it saves it from being ultra repetitive, I think, in a way that right at that point in the film, it's nice to have something a bit different happen.
Yep.
Well, I gotta say,
And his life is ruined.
Yeah,
So.
and it's over. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's done.
what took me right out of that scene was I was like, this is not how we give a massage. We do not. As a former professional massage therapist, I will say, giving a massage on a bed and the way her neck was positioned, I was this is wrong and terrible. But I mean, how delightful that he's like simulating like sexual moves on her, and she's making this was the perfect moment to demonstrate that everything has to go right in all these kills, because he has to get her to make all the noises, and he has to, make sure that the husband comes up at the right time and that he reacts the way he should. I mean, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. And seeing Vincent Price like making these movements on someone, I was just like, that bothers me. It was so odd. But again, I was just like, there's no way she'd be enjoying this massage. There's no way.
Well, she did seem kind of dim too, so there was that. Maybe this is. She's like, oh, I guess this is good.
Well, he had groomed her for several weeks leading up to this, to letting her know that this was.
He worked this all out. It was amazing.
He really did.
And while we're talking about things running like clockwork, another shout out to the meth drinkers, because pretty much they do a really good job when they need to. They're always there pulling their weight.
They're devoted.
For that wine tasting, they all passed themselves off as a high society long enough to fool our critic.
I was like, how does he not notice the smell? Did they shower? I mean, these are the things that go through my head. It's really bad. I'm like, how did he miss this? Because when they're all deciding to go in the back where the barrel is and you're getting to see that it's them, I'm like, oh, no. Our critic must already be in his cups, because how would you miss that?
Yeah, exactly.
And that might be the longest lead up to a kill. And we all know what's coming. We absolutely all know what's coming. And, and it's just so gleeful. Yeah, we're going to put him in the barrel. Yep.
And it's another one of those beautiful locations, like that room is just so exceptionally great.
Yeah. But also,
again, like they just keep appealing to their weaknesses or their pride. And so like for him, it was, you're important. You get to go all the way down here. The other guy was jealous, so they find their way in and then work their scheme out according to their weakness, and so I thought that was fun to watch him go down, and he's just so excited, he's just like, oh, this is great. I am important, and the first guy, we just started laughing immediately when they asked him to come down, and he goes, well, they just need somebody who knows what he's doing or something like that. I'm like, so they got him through pride and whatever. Like each one has their own entry into it. And I thought that was very clever. I liked that.
Well, another piece of it that, I mean, I can never, I don't know if you all feel this way as theater people, but I will often get pulled out of a movie just going, now, wait a second, how did they do that? Like actually physically do that? Because, you know, when you start looking at films that don't have CGI and, you know, the practical effects, I was worried about the gentleman being put into the barrel of wine. And I was seriously like, hang on, we need to rewind that, because how did they put his body in there and close the barrel? Because I don't know that we cut away. And I was seriously like, the fuck? I mean, obviously, you know, we've all worked on films and we know that filmmaking is problem solving. So that's a problem. How are you going to solve that and, you know, look like you're actually shoving a guy into a barrel of wine and closing the barrel and actually not killing the actor? I need to go back and watch that, because it looked real good.
You do bring a really nice point that it is, you know, theater and films as well are all about illusion, you know, pulling off those magic tricks such that you can enjoy it as an actor, or I'm sorry, as an audience, so that you can enjoy it as an audience investing in the situation. But there's also an appreciation of, hey, how did they pull off that magic trick?
Yeah. And some of them you could, I mean, obviously the Shylock kill, you know, Diana Rigg put her head in such an angle, and I was like, how are they going to do it? She put her head in an angle so that you couldn't see him cutting out his heart.
Much like she blocked his suicide, you know, like that's why I thought it was a setup, because it was like she was in their line of sight. So I thought for sure it was a setup, like she was doing for the camera, you know, for the heartbeat to pull out.
One of the things that always kind of bothered me was the fact that he dies in 71 and he doesn't come, or I guess he dies in 70, whatever. There's a 2-year gap between when he dies and when he comes back. And I was kind of like, what was he doing for 2 years? Like hanging out with
planning.
Exactly. He was learning about all the weaknesses of the critics. How could he work them into his scheme? And so, you know, 2 years seems like actually a quite expedient time frame.
Well, and also that theater,
for all
that
those
abandoned
killings,
that theater, that amazing dilapidated theater, which I think was an actual location. Is that what somebody was saying? Like that was a real location?
I believe they all are.
Yeah, and I mean,
there are no sets in the movie.
Oh, amazing and beautiful. But I mean, are we to believe that that's where he was living? He was living in the dilapidated theater, which would make sense.
I think so. I feel like, and for me, like to what you know, your question before about is it a setup or is it a, you know, did he actually do it? I always feel like he really was going for it in the moment when he jumped off that. Like, because I feel like there's something that tells you about his character and the way that he acts, that he is 100% committed. There is no, like, there's no wishy-washy. There's no, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And I don't think he walked in that room when all the critics are celebrating thinking he was going to do that. But I think, you know, in that great scene where he's out on the balcony going around the windows and you just see everybody inside and him doing that monologue. And I love that he's doing the soliloquy away from everybody else, that he's in the background and not in the foreground. And you're seeing everybody in front of him. And he's deciding, like, do I jump? Do I not jump? Like, that's the whole point of that soliloquy, to be or not to be there. So to me, I always feel like, oh no, he's making the decision right now. And he's like, this is my grand exit, like exit pursued by air, like I'm going down, you know? And then I think, like, thinking about like two years, you're like, that's also like the perfect amount of time for somebody to really believe that you're gone. Because if he like showed up 3 months later, you're like, oh, well, clearly it's him, you know, he didn't die. But 2 years, you're like, oh, you've been mourned, you're gone. And he had to amass that crew and like be the Phantom of the Opera for a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, and can we just, since something you just said reminded me of when our second kill came in dragged by the horse. That was just, I mean, you know, when you're talking about like being dead, I was just thinking of the first burial. that wonderful, horrifying interruption of the body coming in. But yeah, I think
brutal too. That's another brutal one.
Yeah. But I'm gonna think about what you just said, Krista, because you know how it is when you watch a movie multiple times and you start to poke holes in it. As you were talking, I was like, okay, but how did his daughter find out? And and it's like, well, there's ways to explain all that. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe he did actually plan to do it. He was committed.
And I think what I love about, even if he did plan or didn't plan, what I love about all these unanswered questions in the film is like, that's so Shakespearean. That's so theater. It's like, we have to suspend our disbelief. Like, you cannot like be like, this is like a tightly like super well made play. Like, it's big, it's grand. These are these huge gestures, and you just kind of have to love that it's not going to make any sense. And it has to be perfectly lined up for it. Then what a thrill, right? Like, what, as a viewer watching something where everything perfectly, like, it all falls into place and happens.
I mean, that's so very Shakespearean, right? Is that, I mean, there's so much of Shakespeare is contrivances and conveniences. And so that seems completely in keeping with this story as well. I think I'm with you, Krista, is that I do think that it was one of those things where he planned to, or didn't plan to kill himself, but he decided to kill himself, went over the edge, survived miraculously, and, washes up on the shore, kind of like, Twelfth Night. And he is reborn, Yeah. And he's reborn amongst
I didn't think of the 12th Night, But it's so true. Like, Shakespeare has all these moments where it's like, well, what in Winter's Tale, it's like, well, my wife's just been a statue. I thought I banished her to her death, and now like she's standing before me, and she's, it's like these things where you're just like, I'm back. It's like the OG soap operas. Like, everything it's super heightened. It's so heightened.
Yeah. I enjoyed too, like when it wasn't 100% clear which play was next in line in the season. So, what possibly could be our next kill. Just sort of figuring out, going, is that? Yes, it is. That's super fun.
I would like to take a moment just to kind of roll through our and this is, spoilers for anybody who hasn't already had the film spoiled by now. But just to kind of go through the various kills. So we have George Maxwell, played by Michael Hordern, who's murdered by a swarm of vagrants, referencing Julius Caesar. Hector Snipe, played by Dennis Price, is speared by Lionheart and then dragged to the funeral of Maxwell behind a horse, Troilus and Cressida. We have Horace Sprout, played by Arthur Lowe, who has the bedtime surgical beheading from Cymbeline. Trevor Dickman, played by Harry Andrews, is lured to observe the living theater performance where his heart is cut out, a la The Merchants of Venice. Oliver Larding, played by Robert Coote, is drowned in a vat of wine from Richard III. Peregrine Devlin, Ian Hendry, although he is not killed, he is severely wounded while sword fighting with Lionheart, a la Romeo and Juliet. And I have to throw out a shout out to stuntman Peter Brace, who was filling in for the 62-year-old Price behind the fencing mask. Solomon Psaltery, what a great name, by Jack Hawkins, Lionheart posing as the masseur and leading Psaltery to murder his wife in a jealous rage, after which he subsequently arrested Othello. Chloe Moon, played by Coral Brown, is we have Butch Knows Best, groovy hairstylist Lionheart, electrocutes her. I love Butch. Butch is my favorite of Price's characters that he plays.
So gross. That wig, Krista. Oh, that wig.
The wig, I loved it.
Meredith Merridew, Robert Morley is force-fed his little poodle puffs, Titus Andronicus. And then Peregrine Devlin, once again, is strapped into the chair with blades coming toward his eyes, a la Gloucester in Lear. But he's not killed again. We also have the collateral damage of Maisie Psaltery, played by Diana Dors, who's strangled by the jealous husband. And Sergeant Dog is killed off-screen in that train-car collision. 11 masterful murders, most of which are seen on screen.
Well, and Edwina dies.
Yep, that's right. And we
That
can
was
only
it.
assume that
Collateral
Lionheart
damage.
dies as well. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
He had to,
Lucky
though.
number 13.
He
he
had
did.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only way. And he probably wanted it that way.
As in all good Shakespeare plays, he has to go at the end.
Yeah.
He has to have the big death scene.
Yeah.
I do like that you read off all their character names, the critics, because just listening to their names, you're like, what a dick. Like, they're just going to be jerks and arrogant and awful. Their name says it all, and they're very funny. So.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that
Charles Dickens was
byline.
right. You're all insane.
Peregrine
Devlin.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to our conclusion of the show. Anybody have any final words they'd like to say about Theater of Blood?
My goodness.
This has been a lot of fun, and it's a delightful movie.
Yeah.
Anybody
I really
who hasn't
enjoyed
seen it should really watch it. It's
absolutely
a really good film.
And if you're like me and you don't do well with lots of scary, it's not scary. It's
No,
not at all. It's really good.
So beautifully done. And I know this doesn't really apply, but I have thoughts when I watch a movie. These like weird thoughts come to me, and I was thinking of Clockwork Orange in a strange way, because considering the time, the place, and the absolute glee taken over the violence, it's like it is easy to forget that this is really horrible what's happening. And I remember that feeling. I know it's obviously not the same thing, but we're in a groovy, it's early 70s in London, and we're along for the ride. I love this ride, and I would watch it again.
I would too, actually.
Just to see what we missed.
Yeah.
Well, here's to the next 50 years of Theater of Blood, and I look forward to having you all in the studio again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.